Hi, my name is Brock Curry, and I am the CEO of Premier Physicians Management Company. In 2011, Premier Physicians Management Company was founded on a simple vision to help improve the quality of California workers' compensation claims process for all parties involved. As all of you are aware, the COVID-19 pandemic has greatly reduced face-to-face medical examinations for the providers in all specialties. Keeping examiners, their patients, and my staff safe is my top priority. To mitigate this problem, I have successfully transitioned my company to the virtual telehealth world over the last 2 months. Today, I am excited to lead you in this informative webinar that will help guide you through the steps to making this transition in your own practice. Now let me introduce our expert panel. Fred Cummins is chairman of the CSIMS Corporate Advisory Council on Telemedicine and HIPAA, an attorney that practiced workers' compensation law for many years, a frequent speaker on HIPAA compliance, and the CEO of eData Services, a company that provides management of medical documentation and other support services to physicians, law firms, and insurers. Welcome, Fred.
Thank you.
Dr. Michael Amster, a CSIMS board member and editor-in-chief of CSIMS newsletter. Dr. Amster is an interventional pain specialist, the founder and director of wellness for doctors, and an adjunct assistant professor, College of Osteopathic Medicine, Touro University, California. Welcome, Dr. Amster.
Thank you.
And Dr. Stephen Feinberg is a physiatrist and pain medicine specialist practicing in Palo Alto. He is an adjunct clinical professor and teaches at the Stanford University Pain Service. He is a past CSIMS president and currently on the board of directors and co-chair of the Education Committee. Dr. Feinberg served as the panel chair for the ACOM Chronic Pain Guidelines panel chapter. He is on the AMA Guides editorial panel and a member of the AMA Pain Care Task Force. Welcome, Dr. Feinberg.
Hi.
I would like to thank CSIMS, Dr. Ron Goldstein, and Dr. Jacob Rosenberg for making this webinar possible. We look forward to seeing you again at the CSIMS annual conference on October 22nd in beautiful San Diego. Let's get started with Fred Cummins.
Hi, guys. Give me 1 second. Brock, can you see my presentation on the screen?
You're looking good, Fred.
Okay, just one question. Are you just seeing the slides or are you seeing notes?
We are seeing your notes as well.
Okay. Give me 1 second.
There you go.
All right. Sorry for the delay, guys. Hi, everyone. Okay, now I'm ready to go. Hi, everyone. My name's Fred Cummins. Before I get started, let me tell you a little bit about myself. I'm a lawyer, but please don't hold it against me. I practiced workers' comp law for about 20 years. During that time, aside from representing injured workers, I represented judges, doctors, and lawyers whenever they got into trouble. I taught workers' comp at Southwestern University, and I was a certified specialist in comp. I even represented CSIMS, gosh, about 25 years ago when I filed an amicus brief on CSIMS' behalf before the Court of Appeals. I also was a civil trial attorney. I handled major personal injury cases, labor law cases, and class actions. If you Google my name, don't believe everything you see there, but I had a pretty good practice with an exceptionally good partner and lots of support. When I got tired of practicing law, I actually started a small outsourcing company with 6 employees in the Philippines. Up until about 6 weeks ago, we had over 500 employees working 24/7 with over 400 clients throughout the US. We support physicians, insurance companies, and lawyers with their medical records and assist them with their front and back offices. I lecture and teach HIPAA at conferences, and I offer HIPAA training to our clients. It sounds like I'm trying to sell you something, but I'm not. While I have the credentials to convincingly sell you on most things HIPAA, I don't sell anything HIPAA. You'll understand the point I'm trying to make in a moment. Telemedicine and HIPAA are 2 very hot topics right now. There are a number of questions that probably brought you to this webinar. Their questions are like, how do I conduct my exams without getting sick? How do I examine a patient using telemedicine? Lots of doctors are doing it. How do I get into it? What software do I use and how much does it cost? Am I going to have problems with HIPAA? What do I need to do to get my reports into a comp case and get paid for them? I actually have the easiest role today. I'm going to tell you what software to use, what it costs, and how to avoid HIPAA problems. What you see on the screen are a half dozen telemedicine platforms that are HIPAA compliant. They cost anywhere from nothing to about $200 per month. The less expensive ones offer fewer benefits, while the more expensive ones offer things that you probably will never use. I put a link on this slide that will take you to an article that describes various software. If you're interested in acquiring something and learning more about the individual software, just go to that link and it'll describe most of the good platforms that are available today. The more difficult role is really going to be played by Drs. Amster and Feinberg. They'll tell you what to do as a clinician and what is expected by the DWC. During his first inaugural address, Franklin Roosevelt said that the only thing to fear is fear itself. That is particularly true as it relates to telemedicine. HIPAA penalties can be draconian. When you speak with many HIPAA vendors, they'll likely slip into the conversation warnings like, if you didn't know and reasonably couldn't have known you were violating HIPAA, you could still be hit with a $50,000 fine. Even more scary is when they tell you that HIPAA convictions can get you 10 years in prison and a $250,000 fine. That's all pretty frightening. And that's also what the vendors are counting on when they try and sell you on their wares. I'll let you in on a little secret that many of you are unaware of. On March 17, 2020, the Office for Civil Rights, which is the agency responsible for investigating HIPAA violations, announced that it was exercising an enforcement discretion for telehealth communications during the COVID-19 public health emergency. Now, what's this discretion that they announced? Well, you go on to read the announcement. It acknowledges that during the national emergency, some healthcare providers may communicate with patients through technologies that may violate HIPAA, something people are afraid of doing. It goes on to state that OCR will not impose penalties for noncompliance with the HIPAA rules in connection with the good faith provision of telehealth during the health emergency. provider that wants to provide telehealth to patients can use any public-facing remote communication product that is available to communicate with patients. OCR will not impose penalties in connection with the use of such products during the public health emergency. This applies to telehealth that is provided for any reason. I'm certain that any reason would include workers' compensation treatment as well as med-legal evaluations. Non-public facing software simply means that the software only allows the intended parties. That would be the doctor, the patient, maybe an interpreter or a scribe, but does not allow the general public to listen in. The announcement even gives examples of applications that can be used which are not HIPAA compliant, such as FaceTime, basic Zoom, and Skype. All you need to do is tell the patient about the potential privacy risk, which is minimal. How much easier can it be than doing a FaceTime video conference on your iPhone and getting paid for it? That's all you need to do, at least for right now. Remember at the start of this talk, I said that I don't sell anything HIPAA. That's the reason why I can be open about using non-HIPAA compliant software to do your telemedicine. In preparation for this talk, I Googled HIPAA and telemedicine. Before I share with you what I found, let me remind you that the OCR announcement that allows for non-compliant software to be used in telemedicine was made on March 17. I came across this article published April 2, 2020. This is about 2 weeks after the OCR announcement. The article is from a consulting company named 360 Advanced. Some of you may know about the company. According to their webpage, they do telemedicine and HIPAA consulting for Fortune 500 companies, as well as individual physicians like you. The article does not mention the OCR announcement, but it does tell the physician that they must meet HIPAA requirements when conducting telemedicine. If you're interested, 360 Advanced is available for a fee to help you comply with the law. I next came across a webpage from a company called DGI. They were marketing Zoom's telehealth software, which they describe as a low-cost, HIPAA-compliant telemedicine solution. This software only costs $200 a month. The Zoom platform that lets you engage in 10 simultaneous patient encounters, and their software integrates with Epic EHR. That's the software that most hospitals use. So yeah, it's pretty high end for integration. Even though we're using Zoom for this webinar, I thought the $200 per month price tag was a little high for a sole practitioner. I also noticed that their webpage did not mention the OCR announcement of March 17, which was over a month ago. I next saw an article dated March 26, about 9 days after the OCR announcement, from a publication called Behavioral Healthcare. It appears to be a press release for a telehealth product named PingMD. PingMD is offering its software for free during the pandemic, but I couldn't find out anywhere what it'll cost after they decide the pandemic is over. Also, nowhere in the article does it mention the OCR announcement. Obviously, vendors selling telehealth software frequently don't mention OCR announcements because it will likely cost them a sale. Let's get back to what is perceived as the HIPAA draconian penalties. The bottom line is that unless you're selling patient information or engaging in other serious willful misconduct, you aren't going to go to jail or be prosecuted for HIPAA violations. 40% of HIPAA security rule violations involve someone stealing a laptop or other hardware, thumb drive or something like that, that contains unencrypted protected health information, patient information. That's an example of where serious penalties are imposed. And if you don't know by now that that you shouldn't have patient information in an unencrypted hard drive, you know, you need some basic lessons. The truth is the security rule is flexible, and penalties are only imposed in most security breaches if you don't fix the problem when you catch it or they call it to your attention. You know, what I tell people that I do training to is that a good rule of thumb is to use common sense when in doubt. I've got a disclaimer, even though I'm a lawyer, I'm not intending to give individualized legal advice. You need to talk to a lawyer to get advice on any specific issues that may relate to you. That's my my few words of, I hope, wisdom. Brock, it's all yours.
Thanks, Fred. That was very helpful. We're now going to move on to Dr. Amster, who's going to give us a clinical perspective. He's already fully transitioned his office, which is very impressive. And I think you'll all be excited to see how he's done it and what it takes. And he's a great leader in this. So let's get on with Dr. Amster. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. It's really an honor to be here tonight. And thank you, Brock and Fred, for starting us off with a great presentation about HIPAA. About 6-8 weeks ago, we were all in a different world, and everything has changed quite rapidly. Let's see here, I'm trying to get to the right, there we go. I want to just start off sharing with you a little bit about my practice and my background. So I'm a pain management specialist. I work part-time at a hospital system in Fairfield, California called North Bay Healthcare. And then I also have my own side QME practice with offices in Sacramento and Santa Cruz. I have 2 part-time staff that work for me. And pre-COVID, we had a partially virtual office. We had virtual phone and a web-based fax service and online scheduling, but we still had paper forms and did a lot of things with paper. And now everything post-COVID, in the last month, we've been able to get going everything to a fully virtual office in just 1 month. So I wanted to share with you some of the insights I have from doing this in this past month. And it definitely was a lot of work, but very rewarding, because I believe that after shelter-in-place rules do slow down in California at some point, that I'll still be positioned in a much better place than I was before. So the next 2 slides, I want to talk about how to make that transition. And you need to do a 360-degree analysis of your current situation. And so the bullet points I have on these next 2 slides are all the things you want to think about when analyzing where you are now and kind of where you need to go and transition into. There are vendors out there that have a cloud-based phone systems that are HIPAA compliant. They integrate voice, faxing, texting, and even some of the video conferencing features all in one package. And so it's been a great transition for me to have everything that my staff has all on one website that they're now using, that we've subscribed to. It's really important that your email communication is HIPAA compliant. And this is one thing that we just changed to a new service that is HIPAA compliant, because with what's happening with doing all these telemedicine video evaluations, we're now emailing our the applicants, we're emailing all the parties involved. And so it's really important that we're communicating with a encrypted email. Our scheduling is now completely online and virtual. The forms, before I had paper intake forms, paper questionnaires like the PHQ-9 ADL questionnaires, and we've successfully transformed everything onto an online-based form. And another option is to create a PDF that you can email out to people, and then they can type in into fields, and then they can email that back to you. I'll talk a little bit more later before I wrap up about telemedicine video platforms, but Fred touched on those already, and there's quite a range of options. Many are free, or at least they're free right now. They may not be free forever, but they're free right now. And then there are some, such as the Zoom, that is very expensive. For their HIPAA compliant version is $200 a month. When we closed down our physical offices, I gave both of my staff members, we had 2 printers, so they each took one home. They're doing all the mailing and printing of reports from home. So everything has been moved out of any office and everyone's working from their homes. And then you also want to look at your staffing. Maybe your staffing needs will change based upon what happens. You need to do an analysis of the hardware and that you have. You might need to consider buying some more computers or scanners or printers or different types of technology that will help you with mailing your reports or producing your reports. You need to think about the software you're using for your report development, such as Microsoft Word, or if you're using a Google Suite or a Mac-based type of program. Then there's other types of web-based programs. I'm going to talk about the use of DocuSign, which I'm now using to have the parties sign an agreement for a telehealth evaluation. And I'll show you a picture of that at the end of my presentation of what it looks like. There might be a need for transcription services, whether you call into a number or you're using something like Dragon. A cloud-based document storage such as Dropbox.
Hey everybody, looks like Dr. Amster has frozen on his screen. We're going to reach out to him and try to get him back online, okay?
Sounds good. Sounds good. We don't know what caused it, but we can address a couple of the questions that were asked, Brock. Just for your information, we frozen, or can you hear me?
I'm back. Did we?
You're back, Michael? Okay.
Okay, I need to add to the slide about your internet provider, making sure you have a solid internet provider. I see a question out there. Is the free version of Zoom HIPAA compliant? No, it is not HIPAA compliant. You have to buy the $200 version, but there are many free options out there that I'll talk about in just a minute. Okay, so moving on, let's see. Yeah, so I'm building a website about my practice, and one of the things I'm going to do, because I can no longer evaluate the applicant in my office, that way I can put my certificate on my website so they can see that I do have an active certificate as being a QME. You may want to explore doing some virtual accounting software. And then you also want to be making sure you have a good, solid antivirus malware encryption suite as well. Let's see. Yeah, am I still sharing my screen?
No.
Oh, that got cut off. Okay. Hold on. I apologize about the lack of connection there. Go ahead and get this moved over. Okay. So how, in making this transition, first thing is you want to give up on perfection, because every suite or software you look at, web-based application has pros and cons. And you will drive yourself crazy, as I was starting to do during the initial week or two of the pandemic starting, trying to find the perfect suite that included everything, and it doesn't exist. You know, companies are going to be good at one or two things, and they're not going to be very good at other things. So you really need to give up on finding the perfect package that's going to provide everything you need. You want to, of course, be aware of HIPAA issues, and it's important that when you sign up for something, for example, I'm using Ring Central for my phone, texting, fax, and for video conferencing, that I got my business agreement. Just because you sign up with a company that has HIPAA compliance doesn't mean you're in compliance unless you have that business agreement that you get from them. So it's important you get all these things signed and all the agreements lined up in a row. As Fred pointed out, you got to look at the cost. So sometimes you're going to have these free offers for 3 months, 6 months, but long-term it may be more expensive. So you want to explore and weigh out the cost short-term versus long-term. You want to make sure that what you choose is easy for you to use, easy for your staff and the parties to all use. You want to have something that's going to hopefully increase your efficiency, and you want to hopefully have some interconnectivity with other programs so that things work and flow well together. When we talk about security, sort of the next cutting edge for everything is what's called two-factor authentication, which basically means when you log in to, let's say, your cloud-based storage program, it's going to send a text message to your cell phone, and then you're going to confirm, maybe through a code, that you are that person, more than just your password, because passwords can be stolen. You want to make sure that you keep a very professional image with whatever you choose. That gives a sense of professionalism about yourself to all the parties. And then finally, you need to take some breaks. You got to breathe. You got to practice patience. So I want to just talk a little bit about telemedicine video conferencing options, and Fred talked about this. Zoom has a HIPAA compliant version, and for $200, you get that BAA agreement, but it's essentially the same Zoom, except that it has encryption on either end. There are free versions of wonderful video conferencing softwares out there, web-based platforms like DoxyMe. It's great. I'm using Ring Central because it's a whole package, and it is HIPAA compliant, and it's basically using the Zoom HIPAA compliant version for a fraction of the price. There's other companies you can subscribe and use. I want to show you one that I used today. I learned about from a colleague of mine. Doximity is a phone app, and you can put it on your cell phone, and when you dial out, it dials out as though it's from your own office. You can put your office number in there, and they even do video calls. So it sends a little text to the patient through their cell phone. They just touch that text, and then instantaneously they show up on your screen, and you can talk with them through your cell phone in a protected way. More and more every day, I think there's better and better options that are coming out with better features. So I want to share some, to wrap up, just share some tricks and tips that I've learned in this last month. So as we know right now, telemedicine visits are opt-in, meaning that we as the QMEs have to go out and ask all the parties to sign an agreement to allow us to do that evaluation via video. And so what we've done is we've created a template letter, and then we're using what's a website called DocuSign. I'm sure most of you have heard of DocuSign. If you've ever bought real estate, probably in the last 5 years, 10 years, you've used DocuSign or for any legal document to sign. So DocuSign is really streamlined this process for us. And one of the things I like about it is that as different people, different individuals in the parties sign the document, this newer version for the signature shows up. So what I'm noticing is about a 50% signage rate. Usually the defense are the last people to sign, or the adjuster. But I think when they see those other signatures that everyone else is on board, I've noticed, I'm thinking that it's tipping the scale in that direction. That there's sort of a momentum, people see that people are signing this and then they want to be part of that. That's been my experience, is about 50% signage rate. A few other lessons I just want to share to wrap up for doing televisits. I've probably done about, well, my regular practice, I'm doing about 20 to 30 a day, but for the QME practice, I've done 15 already, and they're going remarkably smooth. We have created these forms that are now all virtual, no more paper, and I've actually sped up my report writing process, probably twofold, because I'm able to take all the information that they're filling out and essentially just cut it and paste it into my report. And it's been a lot more efficient in report writing. I would advise you to take a screenshot of when you start and end your evaluation so that you can document the start and end time in case the parties contest or have any issues about the time that you're reporting. I would encourage all of us to act in extra professional. So even though you might be home, make sure you dress into a nice shirt, clear clutter you might have in your office. If your kids are at home, tell your kids that you're working to close your door and to not disturb you. And to be extra accommodating during these visits. I've changed the time of an appointment just sort of on the fly, because the patient, when I called them, they were stuck at Walmart in a line trying to get out. So I was just, okay, take your time. When you get home, just let me know. And I was very accommodating to them. And I think it makes a big difference that we are extra supportive of the applicants right now, because they're having a really hard time as well. I would advise you to have your staff test the video connection in advance. Have them do a quick contact out to make sure that the applicant is ready to go when you call them. I've had a few situations where they had problems with the app and we had to come up with a secondary option like Doximity or some other. Actually, I've used even WhatsApp, because that's all the applicant could do, is figure out how to use WhatsApp. And then finally, with the physical examination, I've been surprised with how much information I can get from the physical examination virtually through the video. You can comment on all these different aspects of the applicant's behavior while they're sitting there, noticing, are they able to sit for 30 minutes while you're taking the history? Do they appear to be in any acute distress? Are they comfortable? When you're doing an exam that involves like looking at range of motion, I've told the applicants to, prop their phone up or their device so that we could get a good view. I've been able to look at people's gait. And then finally, a goniometer. You can take this goniometer, and then as you're watching the patient flex or extend on the screen, you can just put your goniometer over that screen, and actually you can get a really accurate measurement of the range of motion. So I've been really impressed with how well the transition's going. And there's, I think, been some silver linings in making this transition to prepare me for just being better situated, where now my office is fully HIPAA compliant. We've streamlined processes that I would have never done before. And my staff is enjoying working from home, and everyone is improving our efficiencies very quickly. Yeah, we've been doing Zoom meetings once or twice a week as an office, so we can all stay connected even though we're not working together. So I'm hoping that if there's interest from today's webinar, we might do some more advanced webinar trainings for CSIM members. So keep your eyes out and ears out if that interests you. And I look forward to seeing all of you, hopefully in San Diego in October for a great in-person reunion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Amster, and thank you for sharing all these efficiencies and tips and tricks that everyone can start to use to make the transition. Now we're going to move on to Dr. Stephen Feinberg.
Before you move on, we've had a lot of questions asking for copies of the slides and particularly copies of Dr. Amster's memo that he has the patient sign. Both a recording of this webinar as well as all of the slides will be available at in the CSIMS web page. It may take a day or so for them to be available, but they'll all be available.
Thank you, Fred. So yeah, we're going to move on to Dr. Feinberg, who is going to give us all the tips on how to stay in compliance with the DWC and just the most recent announcements with their regulations. So in order to do this properly, we must be in compliance. So thank you, Dr. Feinberg.
Hi, everyone. Let me see if I can get this to get to the slideshow. There we go. So I'm going to give you a little perspective on what I'm hearing from the DWC and discuss some of these issues, and we'll have time for questions. So there have been three major interesting things on the DWC newsline. I'm going to tell you in a later slide how to get on this email list, but we're going to talk about March 19th, March 28th, and April 13th. And then you'll notice that I have April (2020), and I know the DWC is working on proposed QME emergency regulations, and I'm at liberty to give you some speculation about that. So we'll get to that toward the end. So let me see if I can, so on 3/19, March 19th, we had the first DWC provision of guidance on medical evaluations. And the DWC told us, and they encouraged all of us to consider creative solutions, all of us, meaning the insurance companies, the attorneys, once again, focusing on providing appropriate care during this very strange COVID time. And they said very clearly that increased telehealth, and they used the word telehealth, which is a broader word than telemedicine, but they felt it was appropriate and that we should look in that direction. And then it might be evaluation appropriate for QMEs as well as for treatment, and particularly for such issues like AOE, COE, and of course, if all parties agreed to the evaluation. And it also mentioned that a QME can cancel now within 6 days if there's good cause without worrying about being penalized. Now, the next one came out not that long ago, 3/28, and these were emergency QME measures. And they encouraged PTPs, the primary treating physicians, to manage care through telehealth. So this was an important statement, and wanted and suggested this needed to be with a video connection. And I underlined video because that's not the same thing as phone only or audio only. And the DWC stated that this video connection was a viable alternative to the physical examination in your office for QME exams as well. And they urged us to all work together, and in fact, suggesting that the carriers and the attorneys should go to the PTP, the primary treating physician, more often when there's a dispute, thus avoiding even having to go to a QME. And lastly, they told everyone that, look, strict adherence to the time limits for scheduling, canceling, or rescheduling a QME may be impossible, and there's a spelling error there. It should be impractical. So they then went on to strongly recommend that all of the following conditions apply to a telehealth evaluation. And the first one was that the injured worker could participate without violating the stay-at-home order. Medical issues in dispute should be looked at and be something that was essential to the injured worker's benefits and had to be addressed no later than May 1st, which is creeping up on us pretty quick. And that the dispute must involve the AOEC issue or termination of benefits or work restrictions. Now, under that strong recommendation, they said there had to be a written agreement. And that basically means that the payer, the applicant attorney, or the injured worker, and of course you, the QME, had to agree in writing that this evaluation should go forward. And you were supposed to put in your report that it was consistent with appropriate medical practice and ethical considerations. And as a QME, it was your job to attest that the telehealth evaluation can be effective and safe and did not require an in-person examination. And I called the legal unit and asked, look, you know, there are situations where that might not fit those three categories. What if all parties agreed that they needed me to provide a telehealth evaluation? And I was told not to worry about it, that as long as all parties agree, go for it. Now that's not in writing, but that's just, I'm telling you what I was told. Now, fairly recently, regarding treatment reimbursement, and thank goodness for this, the DWC on 4/13 posted acceptance of the Medicare fee schedule. And I'm not going to go into detail about this, but basically it says you must use a real-time audio and video telecommunications approach. And this took effect 4/15/20. And what that did basically for my private practice was that it allowed me using telehealth to bill the same as I did for a face-to-face evaluation, assuming I was providing similar services. And that's pretty important because the previous, or the codes we were using, were a pittance compared to our normal fees. And that's not a way to keep a practice going. Now, on Monday, I found out, or actually maybe it was the week before, that there were, and this was kind of like in the rumor mill, that there were proposed, and that's my underlined, proposed emergency regulations for medical legal evaluations, which I was delighted to hear because I was pretty frustrated having difficulty getting authorization for telehealth QMEs and AMEs. And so I was told today by someone at the DWC that I could speculate about what might be coming. It was supposed to be out Tuesday or Wednesday, and then it was Thursday, which is today. And I learned this afternoon that it's pretty imminent, but it's important for you to understand that these are proposed emergency regulations. And for those of you on the CSIMS messaging board, I will forward them to you the minute they come out. But remember that even though they come out, they're not in effect. They must be posted on the website, the DWC website, for 5 days. They then go to the Office of Administrative Law, which has up to 10 days, although I was told sometimes they react faster. So within the next 7 to 10 days, you should be knowing whether this is going to happen. And basically, and without going into details, which I can't do because I'm speculating, these new proposed regulations significantly further support telemedicine medical legal evaluations. They propose a whole new way of us getting paid, basically a flat fee plus a per page charge. And you'll see what those are once they come out tomorrow or Monday, I hope. And I mentioned before, if you would like to get on the mailing list, you can just Google DWC Newsline or go to the website I've given you, and there's a link to sign up so that you get these immediate notices from the DWC when there's something new. Now, the downer to all this is that while there has been a committee meeting and there are recommendations for a wholesale change to the way we get paid for regular QMEs and AMEs, these regulations, while they support some of those proposed changes, are strictly temporary and only during the stay-at-home order. Someone asked a question about how long is the stay-at-home order. Well, first of all, I don't know, and I don't think you do either, but it can be the governor or it can be the local, but basically these regulations will stay in effect until the stay-at-home order is taken back. I have no idea what will happen if we have partial stay-at-home orders, and maybe someone else wants to speculate about that. One of the questions that I asked verbally when I spoke to this individual at the DWC legal unit was, well, what does this mean to us? Are we going to get dinged or censured for using telemedicine? And I was told very clearly that we're in a period right now where they're not looking to go after physicians in any way, shape, or form. We all need to do good work, but we don't need to worry about going a little bit outside the box to do that using telemedicine. Then the question that I asked myself was, and I've kind of had the answer to that, will people agree? Well, I've done 5 of these. Some of you have done a lot more, but I'm not getting a good yes rate from, or my office isn't when asking to do this. Maybe that's going to change with these new regulations, which does put some of the burden on the payer to say yes rather than no. In terms of medical legal evaluations, I know after I've talked to some of you on this call, and some of you have already gone back to work. Some are planning to go back next week or the week after. But I've also talked to some of my senior colleagues who have told me that maybe they're not going back. I will tell you that as a guy in his mid-70s, I've got my wife and kids being pretty concerned about me going back into the office. So it's kind of a day-to-day decision. What comes next? Well, it's pretty unknown, at least for me, and therefore it's kind of scary. I'd kind of like to go back to work. I have something I want to share with you, which is personally something that I thought about and makes sense to me. I personally am planning, when we actually physically see patients again in my office, to have them check in from the parking lot by phone, assure us that they're not ill or haven't been exposed to anyone who's been ill. And then rather than them come and sit for whatever time they sit in my office, they will then come in, get a temperature check, wash their hands, don masks, and go directly to the exam room, not sit in the waiting room, which means that some people will wait in the parking lot. I plan to personally, even though they're in my office, to not be in the same room with them initially, and to complete my history over telemedicine, even though it's in the same office, and chat with them for as long as it takes. I'm cutting down my exposure. I'm then going to go into the exam room wearing gloves and a mask and glasses and do my physical examination, which is the shortest thing of what I do, quite frankly. So that's what I have to say. I think that was my last slide. It is.
All right, thank you, Dr. Feinberg. So it's time to get into these questions and start from the beginning. We have a lot of people asking about what is the best HIPAA compliant telehealth platform. And, you know, we've seen probably 10 different options, but from Dr. Amster and Red's experience, could you guys agree that possibly Zoom and Doxy.me would be the best programs for people to consider in this environment right now?
I can jump in. You know, they're both good platforms. Zoom is, you know, I see a lot of questions that ask whether Zoom is HIPAA compliant, whether other platforms are HIPAA compliant, and you know, there's a lot of technical issues that need to be analyzed and addressed before you can determine whether something is HIPAA compliant, which you guys really don't need to be bothered with. The bottom line is, if the provider of that software, if the developer of that software will sign a business associate agreement with you that says it's HIPAA compliant, you can probably rely on it and go for it. The other issue is, and again, in my talk, I talked about using non-HIPAA compliant software, and one of the questions was, should we start with non-HIPAA compliant free software and then switch over later on? Technology changes almost every day. New software comes out every week. We don't know how long the ability to use non-HIPAA compliant software will be available, but I suspect that that the government will allow you to use it until it's pretty safe for a physician that's 65 or 70 years old to spend time with the patient, and that's going to be a long time from now. So things are going to change. Why spend if you're just getting started? Use the easy stuff. If you've got an iPhone, that's really all you need. Down the line when you can't use the iPhone, the other thing is Apple is develops stuff all the time. They may make FaceTime HIPAA compliant. It's going to be the new normal. So why spend the money now and work on something more complex when you really don't have to?
Fred, let me answer a few questions. I lost them where they are. Basically, in terms of the new paradigm that's coming out in the proposed regulations, it's a totally different approach to getting paid. It's not at $2.50 an hour. It's a flat fee plus per page of medical records. And I don't want to go into the details because I don't actually know for sure what's going to come out tomorrow or Monday. But my own perspective is that for the simpler evaluations, which many people do, it's actually going to be an increase rather than a decrease. So that's a good thing.
Dr. Feinberg, in the meantime, wouldn't you agree that in the consent form, the parties should agree to a type of billing, such as an hourly rate, like a ML 106 or 104 for these exams?
Well, that's true up until this, if these proposed regs come out and get accepted, it gives us an entire new way to bill or to charge, or whatever word you want to use. So I think we really, I know everyone's interested and wants to hear more, but we're just going to have to wait till tomorrow or Monday or next week and see what comes out, and you'll all hear the specifics about that.
Okay.
There's an interesting comment here about how can a dentist do telehealth QMEs? I can't imagine. Any other thoughts about that? How about you, Michael?
There's a similar question from a general surgeon saying, how do I do a hernia exam through telemedicine? The bottom, some stuff you just can't do. And you just have to accept it.
Let me give an example or two. Let's say that you're seeing an injured worker that had back surgery a year ago, and it was a one-level laminectomy. And they come in, and over the video, they say, doc, I feel fine. I can bend forward and back. I can walk on my toes. I can walk on my heels. I can do a squat. They sit in a chair. They put their leg up, negative straight leg raising. They say, I feel just fine. I'm back to work. I mean, that's a DRE 3 with the surgery. So, like, I don't really need to do reflexes when they tell me all that. Would it be nice to do it? Sure. But I think we're being told by the EWC is to be creative, and this is being creative. And of the 5 I've done, I think 3 of them were PNS, and I felt okay with what I said. And what I added in my report was I said, look, I believe I've come up with the most accurate impairment rating, but if there's concern and you want me to do a physical examination, let me know, and I will schedule it as early as I'm back to work.
The other thing is in your report, you're going to have tons of records. And if your opinion is pretty consistent with the treating physicians and the surgeon's findings, I mean, it's good medicine. It's a good opinion.
Further speculating and answering another question, I believe that the new proposed regs will include an allowance for delivering reports via email.
That's great.
That's
That would
speculation.
save a lot in postage.
And are those new billing guidelines going to be for in-person evaluations or only for telehealth?
It's going to be for telehealth, but then when you see the patient in follow-up, it includes the same approach. So yes, it has to be a telehealth component to it. But remember what I said, this is only good for as long as we have a
Shelter in
state
place.
shelter. And
Right.
so it's not a long-term solution, but you know, I personally feel the DWC is working very hard to do the right thing. And I'm hoping that they'll get back on the issue of, you know, posting a proposed new fee schedule. We'll be able to comment on it and have it in effect in a reasonable time.
It's going to be interesting because I suspect there'll be a tiered shelter in place. So individuals with high-risk health issues or certain age groups are going to probably be told to continue to shelter in place, whereas other individuals will be told they don't need to.
There's a question here about family and friends helping. So I did an exam yesterday and I had the wife helping. She held the phone or the camera while the gentleman walked. He flexed his lumbar spine, he extended it, a bunch of other maneuvers. I had her do girth measurements with a tape measure. So, you know, you've got to kind of be creative. Are there other questions on here that we should look at?
Going through them now.
I'd like to announce that any of the unanswered questions will be answered on the CSIMS LinkedIn page if we can't get to them all.
I think we've got it covered, gentlemen.
Well, thank you all for listening in.
And we look forward to seeing you in October at the conference in San Diego. It's going to be exciting and cover a lot of good stuff and new stuff. So please join us at that time.
And if there's any interest in other type of webinar topics from us, please let us know. Go on our website and email our administration so that we can propose more webinars if there's interest in specialized topics for members.
And for those of you who are not CSIMS members, there are lots of reasons. CSIMS is doing a lot for you. Please join.
Much, everyone.
Very good. Thank you, everybody.
In October at the CSIMS annual conference. Okay. Thank you so much.
Good night.